Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing right now. Chris, chill. I am chilled. In fact, I'm so chilled, I'm ready to move on to the next question. We had a YouTube subscriber submit something asking why his photos look better on a Mac than they did on Windows. And he went on to ask questions related to are there any things that Mac can do that Windows can't at a basic level, and vice versa. Well, as far as images or anything looking better on a Mac compared to a PC, that could be relative opinion. I mean, you might say, well, of course it looks better on a Mac. Like Wicket happens to be a Mac dog, and Pixie is more of a Linux girl. So they're fighting right now, as a matter of fact. I'm sorry about that, folks. But at its basic level, it may not look better on a Mac compared to Windows. It could be the fact that the Mac has a better monitor attached to it than your Windows machine. So make sure you're comparing apples to apples, no pun intended, or maybe it was intended. If you have a monitor and you plug it into your Windows machine and then you plug it into your Macintosh if you happen to have one, and the images look different, well, then maybe it happens to be the way that the Mac or OS X does rendering, and on-screen rendering compared to the way Windows does it. And there are some subtleties that's more apparent in text than images. I would say more than anything, it's likely the hardware. You're comparing your monitor attached to Windows to another monitor that might be attached to a Mac, and that's just not a fair comparison at all. You're probably not comparing the same resolutions. You're definitely not comparing the same operating systems, but beyond that, the hardware plays a big role in the quality of images that you get. The brightness, the contrast, in some cases the dot pitch. There are a lot of details that you might have to consider when you go to upgrade a monitor. We've covered that in earlier questions. So I would say it's not a Mac versus Windows thing at that point. It's more of a hardware versus hardware thing. And the nice thing about hardware is, for the most part, it's platform neutral. I mean, specifically monitors. If you've got a monitor, you should be able to use it on Mac or Windows. You may need a different adapter for it, but that's the beauty of that kind of hardware. If I wanted to, I could plug in these two Dell monitors into a Macintosh, and they would run just as well as the 30-inch Apple monitors. And these cost, I don't know, about 100 or some odd less, just because they don't have the Apple logo on them. I don't know, how much is the Apple logo worth to you? Now, as far as the Windows having software that's different from the Mac or better than the Mac, and vice versa, I've talked about this before, but it's still, I think, an important thing to establish. These days, anything that you can do on Windows, you should be able to do on a Mac. Now, I'm not going to say everything, but in terms of the basics, certainly the Mac is equally as accessible in terms of what you want to do with a computer. If you've been used to living in a Windows environment, the old argument was, well, Mac has no software. I would argue the opposite. I would say there's more great software out there for OS X than there is for Windows. Unfortunately, a lot of Windows developers are just relatively uninspired in terms of developing a user experience that is both functional and aesthetically pleasing to the eye, or possibly the ear. There are shortcomings to each particular platform, but don't let the lack of software hoax fool you. I guess it's more of an urban legend at this point rather than a hoax. It's what longtime Windows users claim is the truth, and they couldn't be further from it. But that's okay. They don't deserve OS X to that degree. So anyway, what do you guys think? Is photography better on the Mac than PC if we're talking about the same software just on a different platform? Do you think images do look better on the Mac compared to the PC? Do you think text, the way that OS X renders it, differently than Windows clear type versus the way OS X decides to do subpixel font rendering, font smoothing? Which one do you like better, and why? Just curious. I'm always interested in other people's opinions, because you help sway my opinions over time about products and services and software and images and hardware and you name it. I take it all in. I'm an information sponge when it comes to technology. By all means, leave a comment, or swing by the chat room anytime. We'll talk all about whatever you want to talk about, really, all day long. And even when I'm not here, I was up till 4 in the morning last night, and the chat room was still active, and I thank them very much for sticking with me, at least. I'm sure I was just a footnote in their environment, but it's still nice to have people here all the time at live.pirillo.com.